This podcast is brought to you by Bonus Room Productions and We Own This Town.
I am Jason T. Meares, Esquire. And I'm Kelly Hoyle Bolick. And we are DIMAS Today.
How's it going, Kelly?
JT, I woke up today and I'm still living in a world with a Bill and Ted trilogy, so I'm pumped.
It's not been taken away, and I really appreciate that. I was having a really bad day yesterday. I think you were as well.
Yeah.
I was just angry at the world. Things were really frustrating. The kids were in bed. The wife was in bed. I was just hanging out, and I decided to watch Face the Music again, and it turned my day around.
That's excellent, man. I'm glad. And you know what turned the week around for me was our first interview of the season.
Oh, I was so excited. Yes, we got Laura Shapiro, which you might not know, but she's been involved with Bill and Ted for the past 10 years. She literally wrote the book on Bill and Ted.
Yeah, it was a fantastic interview. Some great stories. She's been working with Ed Solomon for such a long time. You have a copy of the book now. I don't have mine yet, but it looks beautiful. It's gorgeous. I think for anyone that's a Bill and Ted fan, they need to order this book right now.
I am not always a huge fan of these, but the care that was put into this, the packaging that was put into this, I've gone through it 2 or 3 times. There's a lot of cool stuff about the first movies, about the merchandising. There's some really, really awesome anecdotes about filming Face the Music. I can't recommend this enough. And you guys know that if there's a Bill and Ted product that I'm not a huge fan of, I'll be wishy-washy. Not this one. This is an automatic buy. And I'm looking at you, Bill and Ted, the board game.
Hey, I did hear there's a new trivia game coming out, though. I might give that one a shot.
Might, but it's actually trivia about the actual historical folks, right, though? Not about Bill and Ted?
Oh, no? So it's incorporating actual education?
I know, right?
Then I am definitely in. Just a couple notes before we air the interview. First off, want to say that this whole thing ends on a really touching note. So, please tune in. We also want to make a brief apology to actor Bridget Lundy Payne, as we used a couple of incorrect pronouns. So apologies to them.
Without further ado, here is our most excellent interview with Laura Shapiro.
Excellent!
All right, we'd like to welcome to the show Laura Shapiro. Laura, thank you so much for being with us.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I think we just want to start with, how did you become a film consultant in the first place? Like, what was kind of your career trajectory that brought you along?
I have a really, really weird trajectory.
All right. That's what we like.
which is fun to talk about. I started in the music business. I was a concert producer. And very early in my career, by the time I was 19, I was working on really, really huge stadium or even larger size concerts, what they call spectacle level events, which is like the Super Bowl half.
Wow.
The Olympics opening ceremonies. Those are in the category of spectacle events. And a lot of people who work big tours and also work logistics on those events. And I got into that through actually Fleetwood Mac's road manager, who I knew at the time.
Oh, very cool.
Back when Fleetwood Mac was the one of the biggest bands in the world. So he had that level of expertise. And one of the things that I started doing when I was doing that, because I was always involved with photography. My dad had a darkroom in the house and gave me my first camera when I was 8. So I started doing video work to show on the stage, either between acts or behind bands, at a time when that was really new. And got really interested in filmmaking. I was always interested in writing, and I made a transition into film and television, and did a number of different things. I always had more of a gig mentality than an employee mentality, so I went from project to project. And one of my projects, and I was working in the independent film world and putting together really low budget work and working on studio and television a little bit, but more independent film. And one of my projects was a big conference that the Writers Guild Foundation, which is the 501c3 arm of the union, the Writers Guild, put on about screenwriting. And I did a book for the conference that was given away to everyone who attended. And it was a bunch of essays by writers about how they got started in the business.
And this was the first time I got paid for it?
Yes, but this was an earlier incarnation that was smaller, that was just given out at the conference. And one of the writers who participated and who was also on the board said to me, "This is so great. Next time, we're going to do this conference again next year, and we'll have enough lead time. He also wrote novels, and so he had an agent that represented him to the New York publishing world, and said, let's do this as a published book because we'll have the lead time to do that." So we did. And that's how that first book came out. And through that book, I met a huge number of A-list writers. I mean, it was crazy. There are people who are involved with putting on the conference, who were also a lot of the board members of the Writers Guild Foundation, would come up to me and give me, say, a piece of paper with like famous writers' home phone numbers scribbled on it.
Wow.
And say, "Here, I called my friends that we talked about. They know you're going to call them."
That is so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. And that's really, you see, the thing is, here's one of the secrets to Hollywood. Once you are someone who is known to have worked with A-list people and handled yourself appropriately, which means not fanning out and not sharing information about them that shouldn't be shared, and in general just being chill about it, that's a job qualification.
Huh.
Because a lot of people can't handle that. They think, this is my big chance I'm going to pitch my project. No, you're not. You're there to do a job. You're not there to pitch your project, unless that's what you're there for. And if you don't play it in a relaxed way and a professional way, you don't get asked back, because why would that be something that anyone who would hire you to do that kind of job would want an employee to do? And a lot of people don't get that. And I had already at that time worked with big rock stars, so I sort of knew the drill. I also was over being impressed by celebrity because I had worked with big rock stars. And that was why I was asked to work on the Writers Guild project. The person who brought me in knew that I had that background and knew that I would handle myself appropriately. And one of the people I met through doing the book and doing the second conference was Ed Solomon, who is, as I'm sure you know, one of the two writers of the Bill and Ted movies, Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson.
So when about was this that
around 1999. And Ed and I just became friends. We lived kind of near each other in Santa Monica, and he asked me to read a script of his and give him feedback. I had worked in development at Fox by that time.
Okay.
And I had worked on other projects that were in various other studios. Again, sort of with this, just kept on getting invited back into that room where you're the junior person, because I was really young. I was in my 20s then, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're getting invited back into those rooms, and it always was word of mouth. Every time I'd get a job like that, it would be word of mouth, and I would be given more and more responsibility. And I was working directly for the director or the writer or the producer, or as opposed to for the studios or networks or whatever entity. And so it became a consulting relationship, because my relationship with them would expand, because there's a lot of things that I can do. And I myself am an aspiring filmmaker and writer. And so it was great education for me. I mean, working with Ed Solomon over the years has been an incredible experience. He's become, it's been 20 years. He's become a dear, dear friend. We know each other really well. I've learned so much from him, not just about writing, but also about how to handle yourself with integrity within a business where that can be an issue.
Absolutely. He's had some pretty amazing experiences, both good and bad, over the years, it seems like, with different projects.
Yeah. But Ed always, he's the kind of person, more than me, by the way, the kind of person who really makes an effort to always get along with everyone. And even in his bad experiences, I think he walks away and other people walk away still thinking well of him.
Everything I've read about him, and I have not had, I would not say interactions. We've exchanged a few emails, and he has been incredibly professional and incredibly nice and incredibly caring with his time. So I could totally see that being the case. There was that Hollywood Reporter interview that came out recently. I don't know if you had a chance to read that.
Yes, the big spread on him
right
on Friday. Yeah, I actually I saw it, and it's my response to him was, I'm so excited. I knew everything in there.
That's fantastic.
No, it's great, and it's very much it's a very accurate depiction of who he is. That piece.
Ed strikes me as the type of guy who, whether or not a project works out or it doesn't, he seems to learn from the ones that don't work out, and it seems like the type of guy that can always take something away positive from anything.
Yes. And he and that is also in many ways a philosophy, a life philosophy of his. There's a reason be excellent to each other came from him and from Chris. Chris is a very excellent person in similar ways.
Chris, we love Chris. We actually had the opportunity to he was our very first interview on the show when we were first starting out. And
that's great.
I cold emailed him, and he called me back within 24 hours on my cell phone. I was like, "Hey, this is Chris Matheson." I'm like, "No, stop. This is not really Chris Matheson." But it was just so cool, and just
they're both like that. They're not so impressed with themselves that they turn their nose up at interacting with someone outside the Hollywood bubble. It's just not in their DNA.
Yeah, but it's definitely been a benefit for us and our listeners, too. You were a consultant on Face the Music for 10 years.
Basically, since around 1999, I have read and helped with almost everything Ed has worked on. So the initial meetings for Face the Music, the very first meeting they had was in 2007 at a barbecue at Alex Winter's house. It was Alex and Keanu and Chris and Ed. And I don't think I don't think I saw a draft till 2011. Maybe something like that. But I knew that they were working on it and talking about it before that.
That's so cool. I would love to be a fly on the wall of that first meeting.
Well, we talk about it a little bit in the book.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was as much they hadn't all four of them seen each other in quite a while at that time. So I think there was also a lot of just hanging out and enjoying each other's company too.
We've talked about, you brought up the book, so let's actually talk about the book. This thing is amazing. I'm a lifelong nerd and a completionist and a collectorist of all of my favorite stuff. And this is by far the nicest film book I have ever owned. I mean, you can just...
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That's so gratifying.
It looks incredible. It's got a nice heft to it. And you open it up and you just see the binding. It's that wonderful picture of Bill and Ted from the first film, like one of their publicity photos that everybody's seen. But you can tell that so much care was put into this thing. I'm just blown away.
Welbeck Publishing does beautiful work. I can't take credit for the design. That's all Welbeck, and they do beautiful, beautiful work. I'm proud to be working with them. Seriously.
Now, I was just going to say I don't have a copy yet. Jason has a copy, and he's sent me many photos so I could get at least a look at it. But I did see Ed say as much online that he even said that he's not usually one for movie books, but he had nothing but great words to say about the book and you. So
yeah, well, I'm thrilled that Ed liked it. He's the reason I got the job. I mean, if you had asked about my career, I've worked on many, many different things, both my own projects as well as projects for a lot of different filmmakers and writers and studios and that kind of thing. And in this case, with this project, I think it was in December. So it was very recent, really. The book came together pretty fast in terms of book publishing timelines. In December, the publisher called Ed saying, we're going to do this book. And Ed said to them, I usually don't like books like this. I'm not sure I want to participate, or I want to know more before I participate, I think is a more accurate way of saying it. And Ed said, who's writing it? And they said, we don't have anybody yet. And Ed said, oh, well, can I recommend somebody?
Oh, so cool.
Nice.
And that's how I got the gig. And that worked for everyone involved, because I was able to interview almost everyone because they just gave me everybody's email address and emailed everyone and said, all the actors and the behind the scenes people I interviewed, and said, hey, Laura's going to email you. It's an insider on the project. She's been working on it. And so other than with Keanu, who I went through his publicist in a more formal way, because that's necessary with people at his level. They have a little bit more of a buffer zone. I was just able to, if I had a question, I was able to email Alex Winter and just say, hey, Alex, I'm trying to figure out the timeline about how things happened. Did this happen before or after this, that kind of thing. And it was very, because I was trying to tell the story of all three films in order in the book as a narrative.
I've got to say, there are pictures in this book that I've never seen before, and I think that was it was surprising to me as a guy who spent like so many years looking through all this stuff. So that was great. It was a real treat.
Which ones? I'm curious.
There was some on-set stuff with the booth hanging that I had not seen before. So a lot of stuff from the first one and a few from the second one that I had not seen. And just
there's missing footage from the first one.
Yeah.
And we pre-pandemic, we had this scheme about looking for it, because I bet that it's in a film vault somewhere in LA. And I wanted to kind of crowdsource. The pandemic killed all of this because everybody's closed, right?
Right.
I wanted to. There's two pieces. There's a music video that they shot at Venice Beach. That there's a still with Keanu that clearly looks like Venice Beach. And Keanu, I think Keanu's like in midair on a skateboard. That's from that music video shoot. And then the prom scene. There's pictures from the prom. They shot a whole prom scene for Excellent Adventure, and there's stills from it where they're in tuxes with short pants.
Yep, we've seen those, and we were able to talk to Diane Franklin about that too.
Yeah,
so
but no one knows where that footage is. And I had a whole scheme concocted where I was going to find them, and then we could do kind of a, like the opening of Al Capone's vault.
Yeah. Oh, it would be awesome. Yes. I know Diane had told us that she felt like had that scene made it in the movie, their prom outfits would have just started a whole new craze, a whole new style in 91.
It's probably true. It's probably true. There's some 16 millimeter footage at the UCLA Film and Television Archive connected to Excellent Adventure. The film was shot on 35, so it's not the film. And it could easily be that music video, because it makes sense back in the late 80s when they were making this, that they would have shot with a smaller, lighter 16 millimeter camera shooting on Venice Beach. But UCLA is, I had an email exchange with them, and there's no way to go in and look at it right now.
I know Alex has I've seen him tweet, that he's essentially given up on finding it. But if you were somehow able to track that down, it would be incredible.
Well, I have a couple of friends who are involved with film archiving. There is a whole sort of sub-community in the industry of film archivists, and so I was gonna try.
Well, if there's anything we can do to help post-pandemic.
Post-pandemic, maybe we'll make a little project. That would be fun. I was gonna film it all, handheld with an iPhone.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would be great.
Going into the dusty vault.
I smell a YouTube documentary here. I think we can do this.
Exactly. It could be a lot of fun. The one film I have a friend who has a very big company, and one of the things that he does is digitally archive. He's got contracts with several studios, all their old assets, and so he knows all the film vaults in town and everything. And he confirmed my suspicions, which is what he said. If it was video, it might be lost, but the fact that it's on 35 means that it probably is somewhere, because people don't destroy the 35 millimeter film. It would be very rare that it would be destroyed.
That is a ray of sunshine then in my world.
Yeah.
The idea that this stuff possibly still exists is just so exciting to me.
Yeah. So hopefully in a year or two, once we're past our isolation, we can revive this and go out and find it.
Oh man, that'd be great. So let me ask you a few more Face the Music questions. Have you seen the finished product?
I have, and I also saw several rough cuts in the editing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love it, and I think they did a great job. I love. I was a big fan of Dean Parisot's before ever meeting him because I love Galaxy Quest.
Yes.
Oh yeah, same here. Same here.
I'm a big Star Trek nerd. And, and Galaxy Quest is just so great. And then it turns out that Dean is every bit as excellent a person as Ed and Chris, and fits in very well with that sensibility. He's just a wonderful person. And so when I met Dean and started going to some of the, viewing the cut, giving feedback, that kind of thing, it was really nice because he's such a great guy. And he did such a great job.
Yeah, we couldn't have been more excited when it was announced that he was director. It was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was in our top 5 easily, and it made so much sense on every single level, and it just it clearly worked out.
Since you've seen this kind of from the groundwork up and you've seen the finished product, are you able to talk about some of the differences from maybe the first versions of the screenplay you saw and then what the final version came out to be?
There were things that were more extended in first versions of the screenplay. They had more with the princesses. They had so many budgetary limitations. They couldn't afford to shoot a third. There's this story of Bill and Ted traveling around the time in Face the Music of Billy and Thea traveling around in time to collect the musicians, right? And
right.
then there's the wives as well. And so that kind of just fell by the wayside. There were some bigger set pieces that would have required bigger effects, but honestly, I'm blanking on what they were because it was so long ago that I read them. But
Right.
I know that they were bigger in certain ways. The big thing that I'm disappointed in, but it also was potentially could have been a problem if it wasn't received right, was that they were going to work in the scene with George Carlin, where there's the scene where Bill and Ted talk to themselves at the Circle K. Right, in the first movie. And there's other footage of George, I guess, that maybe wasn't used, different angles or something. And they were going to work it in so that Bill and Ted in Face the Music went there and had an interaction with George. I know there were legal issues at some point, which there shouldn't be because the studio, they own Bill and Ted, the original Excellent Adventure. So I think that could have been worked out, but then what it would take to do whatever CGI they would need to do to sort of incorporate Carlin in, and would it be good enough or would it be sort of Uncanny Valley?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the hologram thing worked out really well. I think they ended up threading the needle very well there.
Yeah. Yeah, I just loved so much.
Yeah.
And I got to talk to his daughter, Kelly, who the character of the film is named after, when I did the book. And she's wonderful and is a great steward of her father's work.
Oh, yeah. I follow her on Twitter, and she brooks no nonsense with people misabusing her father's name.
Yes.
Right.
Well, she also handles the business side of his work. She, in his estate, and we were talking about licensing and of all the different television specials he did and that kind of thing. So she actually is in charge of that.
It was such a nice tribute with Kristen Schall's character, being named Kelly, obviously.
Yeah.
Would have loved to have seen them work that Circle K scene in, because I actually remember reading interviews with Madison and Solomon early on. They were kind of indicating that they were going to revisit that scene, but regardless, how they did it was great.
But it would have been wonderfully meta, wouldn't it, though, to have them go back to that scene.
Oh yeah, sure.
There's a lot that would have been great about that.
Yeah,
and there was more with Death too. That there were different versions where Death was in more scenes and did more, and things were sort of moved around. But part that was because of scheduling, I guess, in part budgetary, and I actually think what they ended up with was great.
Yeah, it really was.
It worked really well and gave Bill Sadler a real platform in a way.
And a pretty good editor on this film, I do believe. Don Zimmerman.
Yes.
No, they had amazing people working on this film. The effects people, Bill Corso, Oscar winner for Benjamin Button, who also did the prosthetic makeup effects in Bogus Journey, and Freaked. He and Alex became good friends, and he did the one Freaked as well. And Kevin Yeager, who's kind of a legend, and who designed Station.
You can just tell watching the movie, everyone involved in it was 100% in. Nobody was phoning it in. Everybody was giving it their all. And it really shines through in the final product. And in things that you don't see that everywhere. Like the most recent Star Wars films, they're fine, but you don't get that sense from them that everybody on set is giving everything to make the highest quality thing that they can, you know?
There are limitations to having a huge budget. It's counterintuitive in a way, but the Star Wars movies have all the money they need to do whatever they need to do. This film had not enough money, to do what they ended up doing, but they managed to do it.
Right. That tension can really breed some amazing stuff.
Yeah. And you also have to want it really badly.
Right. And this is, I think, Kelly and I can both agree, the reason we were not worried about this movie not being good ever since it was announced. It's because they had Chris, they had Ed, they had Alex, they had Keanu, and I can't see any one of those four coming back to this project if it wasn't going to be really good. If they didn't have complete faith that they were going to make something worth making.
That's exactly right. And it's just so gratifying that it did, and that it's being really well received, and there's a life for this. And I think all the new people they brought in are great. All the younger, the next generation, right?
Right.
I could absolutely see Samara Weaving and Bridget Lundy Payne doing more with those characters.
Bridget Lundy Payne especially just really, you could tell how well she studied Keanu and Ted in the earlier movies to really mimic him. It was great.
Yeah. That's actually the first thing I said to her when we got on the phone. It's so there, so present, right, in her performance in a great way. And Anthony Carrigan.
Wow. That guy just...
Dennis Caleb McCoy.
He nailed it. I have trouble thinking of an actor with less screen time. Obviously, he was an important character, but he was not on screen much. But he made such a memorable impression with his very short scenes. He's so
brilliant. Good. Well, I already was a huge fan of his from Barry.
Yes, NoHo Hank.
NoHo Hank.
Yep.
NoHo Hank is so lovable.
I know.
He's a murdering Chechen gangster, but he's sweet. He's so sweet.
A little bit of parallel with Dennis, a murderer who's becomes very lovable.
Who just wants to be friends.
Yeah.
Listen, if they sold stuffed animals of either of those characters, I would definitely buy them for my kids or myself.
Well, Bill and Ted. You probably know because you're a collector, and there's a section in the book. But Bill and Ted have a history of leaving no merchandising stone unturned.
That's true. I mean, you got the cereal from Purina, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that I had not seen in there was Ted in a sports car. I had never seen that.
I mean, this was just the studio the studio, and the same company has had the merchandising rights for the whole time, and so we got images from those sources.
That's really cool.
Yeah. That's where that came from. So there were things that I didn't know, but I think there were things that Ed and Chris hadn't seen too in some of those pictures. And there's some great images of the fan something that looks very sort of zine, pre-internet zine fan.
Right. We remember those days.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Yep, me too. And, so there's a lot of history there, and part of what happened with Bill and Ted is that even though the movie was a success, but not a huge hit, but the Saturday morning cartoon ran for quite a while, and so it's a whole generation of kids who were a little younger than the audience for the film that got very attached to Bill and Ted.
It's absolutely true. And I think the other interesting thing that worked in Bill and Ted's favor and gave it legs, I know that when I was in high school, if we had a substitute teacher, sometimes they would show Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and that would
I did not know that.
yeah, like they would wheel the movie in with a VHS, and you'd watch part 1 on Wednesday and part 2 on Thursday.
And that was instead of history class.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Just a time killer. That's the education system here in Tennessee. And Jason and I were in middle school together, and I can definitely remember.
And I think Ed does not know this, and he's going to love it. I'm going to have to tell him this.
Yeah. But just delightful. And I've shown my daughter all 3 of the movies now. She's 7, and she loves them. She wants to go as Thea for Halloween, which is great. I mean,
that's
just
exciting.
Yeah, and I don't know, Kelly and I have talked about this ad nauseum at this point, but just her love and the fact that the 3rd film had the daughters and somebody for her to latch onto has just been delightful. Yeah. And
well, both Ed and Chris are fathers and Dean, but particularly Ed and Chris and Alex. They all are. They're fathers, and they're fathers who are very, very involved in their children, in caring for their children. They're not off on a film set all the time, which happens a lot with people in this industry. They make a really concerted effort to be there, and having children was so important to them in their lives. They wanted to reflect that in the story.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're talking about this. I mean, Kelly and I have also had conversations, but the care and the crafting of the father-daughter relationship in this film is actually kind of breathtaking to me. They are fathers who aren't possessive of their daughters at all. The fathers aren't obstacles to their daughters' desires or identities, and it's so refreshing to see.
Yeah. Well, and I know that I don't know Chris as well as I know Ed. I know Ed is very much like that in his life. His daughter's in college and his son's just out of college. So, pretty much out of the house, but he's deeply involved with his children.
I think that's really what gives the movie its legs, and that's what's going to make it last. I think if you had just had a 3rd movie completely center on Bill and Ted, I don't know. I don't know that it would have been as good. I really don't think it would have.
Yeah, well, and Bill and Ted having a midlife crisis because they haven't written the song that saves the world. It becomes kind of dark. And and I do remember one of the things that I said in the early drafts to them is more of the daughter. And there was a point in time where they did not go back in time and find the musicians and put together the band in earlier versions of the scripts. That came sort of in the middle. And so, I remember very early on saying, more daughters, more daughters, more daughters.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the fact that it took 10, 13 years to get this movie made, do you think that had kind of a positive effect on the quality of everything? Because
yes, absolutely. In terms of the writing, yes. I think what happened that I have seen, because I'm so close to Ed's work, I know how much his writing has deepened as he's gotten more. It doesn't stop. Development as an artist doesn't stop. We have this culture that's youth obsessed, and particularly in Hollywood, where there's so much ageism, that writers after a certain age, it's hard for them to keep on working, which was one of the things that was one of the subjects of that Hollywood Reporter article about Ed, that at his age to be where he is in his career is actually unusual. And it's actually terrible that that's the case, because artists get better as they age. If they keep on doing it, and if they keep on looking at their own work with honesty, and Ed is certainly one of those people. And I think Ed is a better writer now than he was in 2007, and I know he'd agree just based on that. And so, yes, absolutely, that's the case. I think also there's a difference in terms of the age of their children, and their children are now close to the age of Billy and Thea. And 13 years ago, they were not.
Makes sense.
So having direct experience of parenting, particularly a daughter through her teenage years, which is as a woman, I can say very honestly, an incredibly challenging thing to do.
I know Alex, making the press rounds, has talked a lot about how as more time's gone on, it's actually made this idea of the third movie that much funnier, the older that Bill and Ted actually are. So
Yeah, and I think that's true as well. And Alex, it's so nice to see Alex acting again, too. I mean, he's
for
become
sure.
a wonderful filmmaker behind the camera, but his performance is so good in this. I want to see more. I want to see more of him on screen.
it is. I really felt that. I felt that I don't know if carrying the load is the word I would use, but the way he brought Bill back to life just seemed like he did it with so much more ease than maybe even Keanu. And I don't know, that could be for a million different reasons. I did like how the movie sort of portrayed Ted as a little bit more downtrodden, a little bit more depressed. But then you also have to wonder, with Keanu playing such serious roles in the last 10 years, that getting into that headspace of Ted maybe was a little bit harder for him. I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't talk to him about it when I interviewed him, but I felt like I agree with you about that. His performance is more serious, more dour and darker than Ted in the first two movies is just this ebullient joy, and you want to see Keanu. There's that grin that he breaks into.
Yeah.
And it's like you want to see that again. And there's a term that Stephen Herrick, the director of the first film, used about them. He called it the puppy factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he would be, watching a take, and he'd say, no, the puppy factor is not up there enough. And that would be like the direction. He's like, more puppy factor. If you think about it, that's right? They're these sort of eager, kind of floppy physicality to the way they played it, and the sort of just innocent good-naturedness, and they've lost innocence. And I think that in some ways, Keanu is making an acting choice to someone who had that innocence who's lost it.
Yes, and I think it definitely pays off in places, right? Especially that scene where he's visiting his oldest self and that conversation they have. I think that works so much better because you have maybe a little bit more downtrodden Ted up to that point.
Yeah,
the whole subplot between Ted and himself is just genius because it is emotionally affecting, but it's also deeply, deeply silly. Right?
It absolutely is, and everyone involved really that loves the silliness of it. I think that's part of what they love. It's absurdist.
Yes, it absolutely
absurdist.
is.
Even more finer tuned than silly. It's absurdist, and it's a lot of fun.
And you say puppy dog factor, and that's probably exactly what I meant to say with Bridget's performance. Billy brings the puppy dog factor, and that was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a fantastic interview. We really both appreciate you giving us the time here.
Oh, thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and it's one of the things. As I was writing this, I started writing in January, so by March we're in the pandemic, and I'm working away on it and interviewing people, and it's just feels like the world is falling apart. And it was so grounding and important to be working on this during that time. And one of the things that came up, and there's quotes from people in the book about this, when this was started, nobody thought this film was going to be making a profound statement about the state of the world. But now, Be Excellent to Each Other has turned into an incredibly important political idea. And that's really important to the world right now. And it's a reason why I thought that the film would do really well. And I think it is doing well in large part because of that. People want to feel that way. And it's a reminder that we need to pay attention to that.
I could not have said that better myself. I know, speaking for Jason, we completely agree with that sentiment. I know it's what's been helping both of us get through this time. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the funny little coda to that is when I was talking to Keanu and doing the official formal interview I did for the book, I asked him about that, and I said something similar to what I just said. And he laughed, and he said, and party on, dude. And we both kind of cracked up. It was good moments, right? And he's right. Be excellent to each other is half of the idea. Party on, have that lightness in your soul and it's just as important to remember that.
My heart is just goo right now, Jason. It's goo.
Doing this podcast with you is a joy already, man. I mean, like it's the highlight of whatever week that we're recording in. But man, that was delightful. So nice. Cannot thank Laura enough for sharing time and insight and just being so open and honest about everything.
She was so sweet and thoughtful to talk to us, and couldn't agree more with her sentiments at the end of the interview.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. Well, let's thank Michael Eads and We Own This Town for producing this podcast.
And of course, Scott Bricklin, our main man on the guitar, and Scooby Tunes music for our excellent theme song, Walk Away.
And as always, Kelly, be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes! I think I'm gonna make some tacos.
Oh, nice. We're having salmon patties.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Patty.
Dabs.
So, the word patty is just funny word to me.
It is. It is.
Patty.
Patty.
There's like horror patty, and then there's salmon patty, and a burger patty.
Yeah. All right.
Patty from Charlie Brown.
Yeah, peppermint
patty.
Right?
That's the patty.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to shut the hell up now.